All right, welcome everybody to Derek's Discussions with Matt Spirio. And, we're both from Marist College. He's going to be graduating this year, so it's going to be sad to see him go. Great leadership qualities that he brings to the table. So, first of all, Matt, how you doing today?
Doing pretty good. I'm excited to be here and get the chance to talk with you. So happy to be on board.
Let's first go into, you're a senior, you're basically directing the entire RedFox report. How is that experience like for you?
It has been both probably the most taxing thing that I've ever done, but simultaneously the most rewarding thing that I've ever done. Um, just kind of the idea of it when we kind of pitched it over the summer of having this halftime show was something we completely kind of just made out of thin air. So getting it up to speed and getting everyone up to speed on what exactly it is that we want to do has been very difficult. And it's certainly, taken a lot of long hours during the week, but to see the finished product, and I don't know if you saw, but during well, I think it was Boston University basketball game, they actually aired one of our final segments, which I think was the first one that we all saw on air. So to see that was just absolutely rewarding to know that we got the chance to put something that was on an ESPN broadcast.
And then how did this come about? Obviously, you talk about this summer, but kind of like what kind of started this idea of having a halftime show for Marist Sports?
Yeah, so I think it was honestly a series of happy accidents that occurred that kind of led us there. So I don't know if you remember our old advisor and leader for sports communication, Jay McManus,
Barely.
who works. She's worked at ESPN and a number of outlets. I was planning on interning for her this fall, and kind of just setting up the speaker series and creating the newsletter and getting that all kind of just organized. Um, and I was in this when I was studying abroad last spring. I was in Italy, and I get a text from Jane, and she just goes, "Hey, I want to let you know I'm not coming back." So I was like, "All right, I don't know what's going to happen." I find word that Chris Riviezzo, who works at ESPN, is going to take over, and he reached out to me and says, "Hey, I still want you to intern for me." So the two of us who don't, really have any clue what we're doing, the only thing we really have in common is that he has a experience in directing and producing and being doing creating like shows like this, and that's pretty much the same experience I had. So we were just like, you know what? Why don't we just kind of do what we know how to do, and let's make this show because the two of us know how to do it. We kind of talked about it over the summer, and when we got to school, I was like, give me 2 weeks, I'll get everything up to speed, and we're gonna make this thing happen. And that's kind of just exactly what we did.
I mean, how was it, first of all, going abroad, being, in sports communication, knowing the fact that, let's be honest, there's not a lot of sports going on abroad besides soccer.
Yeah, it was certainly very different. A lot of times you go to bed when a game is kind of just starting. You don't get to see all of the action necessarily. I do have a great memory of I think it was game one of the Nets Celtics series. I think it was Tatum's game winner. I don't know if you recall this.
I probably don't because I'm not a big
Uh,
NBA guy, but go on.
it was game one of the Celtics Nets series, and me and one of my buddies, we were at this like little like restaurants will have like a little like outdoor area where like a lot of people just go to like smoke cigarettes, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And they had one little TV on, and was the only place that we could find the game. So we were sitting out there to watch. Uh, and Tatum is his game winner, and nobody in the place is paying attention except us. And we're like, yeah, like we're going
Hmm.
great, and everyone's looking at us like we're insane. Yeah, definitely was deprived of sports. I missed a lot of the NCAA tournament. I was watching it like 2 in the morning. I did get the chance to go to a soccer game over there, which was really, really cool. Got to tour a couple when I went to Barcelona. I got to tour Camp Nou in that stadium. When I was in Paris, I drove past PSG Stadium. So certainly a different feel, but I definitely was just missing a huge part of my life when I was over there, and it was definitely the thing that I missed the most over there. I remember the night that I landed back in the States. The Rangers had a playoff game, which I watched. Golden State had a playoff game, which I was like on like 2 hours of sleep. It was in like 5 a.m. Italy time, but I stayed up to watch both those games because I just missed it so much.
And then what would you say, you mentioned kind of being sports deprived, overseas. What would you say is the significance of sports just in your life?
I mean, I've always said it, and the words that I always use is it's just a unifying factor. I think that there is so much camaraderie, and there's so many different ways that sports can bring everyone together, and and I could go on a million tangents about it. I think that the best example of how important it is has been this year at Marist. When you look at the Center for Sports Com, when you walk in there on any given day in Lowell Thomas, you will always see people hanging out. We're always around people that a lot of the sports com people I had never really known over the years. I was never that involved in center field, but I've gotten the chance just over sports. We've all bonded so much this year, and we're always in there kicking it, talking about sports, watching sports, talking about stuff going on at Marist, talking about stuff that's going on in the pros, and it brings so many people together. And I think that that is what it's always done for me. Is it has brought me closer to so many people.
And then, we talk sports and, when you're watching just a typical game of sports, what is your mindset? Like, obviously, you mentioned, directing and stuff like that. So, like, obviously, your mindset is a little bit different than the quote unquote typical fan. But, like, what are you looking for, when watching a sports broadcast?
I would say certainly my the way that I look at a broadcast now is so different from the way that I used to. If you'd asked me this question when I was like a freshman or a sophomore, I would say I was always looking for, quality stats and for, a smooth broadcast where there's actual insight beyond just the game going on. But now I look at it from such like a director perspective where I'm noticing little tricks that they do. I'm like more critical of some of the talent or like some of the things they're doing, like, oh, like they're not well prepared because like I know what has to go into it now. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like I look at a highlight and I'll be like, yeah, that's not a great highlight. Like here's how I think about how I would have done a lot of things, to be honest with you. I'm definitely a little more critical than I used to, which is probably both good and bad. But that's probably the way that I look at it now.
And then, what got you into sports?
Uh, my dad certainly was probably the biggest thing. He was a huge sports fan growing up. And I think it was kind of the timing of when everything happened. I was in first grade when the Giants won the Super Bowl against the Patriots, Super Bowl 42. And I was just kind of getting to that age where I could start to understand sports. And there was just this big craze when the Giants won the Super Bowl. And it kind of took over I mean, being in New York, it kind of took over where I was. Like, they had the big photos in the paper every day. I don't know if you ever remember these. It would be like every day there'd be a different Giants photo in the paper. And I remember all of that. I remember just everyone wearing Giants shirt. It was like such a big thing when the Giants won that Super Bowl or just on that playoff run. And that was kind of what really, really sparked my interest. And then honestly, I just started like I would go to the library in school. Like they make you go to the library and like check out a book, and everyone's picking out like Magic Treehouse and all these other like whatever. And I was getting like the big like sports encyclopedia. Like I just wanted to read about sports. I just wanted to know about sports. So like I would be like reading all these like random books about like old football stuff, like and it just continued to grow from there and just turn into an absolute obsession, like in everything that I did. Um, I still have pictures of like me and my brothers would take like Christmas card photos, and like my brothers are in like whatever shirt, and I had like my Peyton Manning jersey on because like that's what I wanted to wear. Like it was just an obsession from day one.
It's funny you mentioned the Giants Super Bowl when you were in first grade. At that time, I think I might have been like 3 years old. I remember the other one when I was in first grade, and my teacher kicked me out of the class because I was wearing Giants gear. But that's for another day. Um, you know, you're a senior now. So what are you looking forward to doing, after college within, sports communication? Because you look at the sports communication concentration major and it's so broad. And you talk about directing, I mean, obviously I know like you do a lot of stats for the football team, you do a lot of different things. So what in particular do you see yourself doing once you're settled in and
Yeah, that
finally.
is kind of just seems to be the question, and I don't have a concrete answer. I think that especially at Marist. Like you say, it's so broad, but I think it's also just so incredibly versatile. I think there's so many. I think sometimes people look at broadness as a bad thing. It's like, oh, it's just kind of like a general, it's just sports. No, there's so many different places you can take it. It's what you do with it. And I mean, at FanDuel last summer. That's certainly something that is still on my radar. Um, and that's not have anything to do with production or writing. That's completely like numbers and behind the scenes and stuff like that. I certainly have loved the directing and stuff I've done this semester, and I would hate to give that up. I think writing is always the backbone of everything that you do, and I think that that's something that's not out of the question. I think there's so many different places that I can go, and it really will come down to what's best for me, what's best for my family, what's best for the people around me. I don't think that it will necessarily. I don't really know. I don't have a concrete answer. I love everything that I do, and I want to continue just kind of being like a Swiss Army knife, which I think Marist kind of, if you make the most of every opportunity, allows you to do. You can kind of do a little bit of everything.
For those people out there who don't know Matt Spirio, what is one thing you want them to know about you?
One thing I want them to know about me. I feel like a lot of people kind of know me. I feel like at least in this current light, as the RedFox report guy, I feel like that's kind of what I've become this semester. Is I'm the RedFox report guy, but I don't think people realize the amount of writing uh, experience that I have. To be honest with you, I don't think that people. I started writing for this website per sources. They had over like 200,000 followers on Instagram when I was in high school. I was like a junior in high school. I started writing for them. And then I started writing for SOG Sports, which honestly, I'm sure people have seen SOG Sports and don't even know what SOG Sports is. They have, I'm currently checking, over 250,000 followers on Instagram. Like, you've probably seen, I know a bunch of people, random people that follow them. I started writing for them midway through college, strictly about NFL on those two, occasionally collaboration piece on like NBA. I've probably written between those, my blog I did in sports reporting, probably over 150 pieces on NFL. Uh, that like a lot of people have never really seen, to be honest with you. I've been kind of covering the NFL since I was in high school, and I don't think that people really see that because when I got to school, I didn't really write that much. I wrote a little bit my freshman year. COVID happened. I kind of just started doing all the MCTV stuff. So writing is still just important to me as it ever was, and I don't think a lot of people necessarily realize that.
Yeah, I actually think I have uh read one of those pieces. I don't know which one, but I was scrolling the other day through because I get the fans daily emails, and I was just going through them, and one of them was actually Zach Musso was actually writing one of them, and I was reading those. So it's funny you mentioned
Yeah, no,
writing.
he does the same thing. Yeah.
All right. Now part two of Derek's discussions. Just talking sports. We're gonna start with the NIL. Obviously, being at Marist, NIL is not prevalent at all. Just based on I mean, it is prevalent, but it's not as important. Just based on Marist being, a lower level tier, kind of the underdog mentality of kind of everything going on. What are your thoughts just on NIL coming out?
I've always said, and my stance on this hasn't changed, but I've heard slightly different opinions. The NIL is great for the college sports viewer. I think that the people who watch college sports, I think especially in college basketball, um, the NIL is so great because it keeps your Drew Timmies, it keeps your Oscar Tshiebwe's, like the guys who are great college players and maybe not necessarily great pros. It keeps them in college for an extra year or two because they can still make money there. They can still play. They don't have to go chase an NBA contract and be the 59th overall pick in the NBA draft and maybe make an NBA roster one day. They can make some money in college because they're the stars of college basketball. I think there certainly is a lot of places where it gets murky. It probably happens more in college football, if anything. Um, but I think it's overall a good thing for college sports. I think that there's probably arguments against that, but I'm saying net positive.
Okay, and now obviously Mark Emmer is finally out for NCAA, which to me is just absolutely fantastic because he was horrendous. Now Baker is coming in for NCAA, and kind of the big discussion with the NCAA and NIL is, how are they going to view NIL? Are they going to view this as an amateur sport where they got to, be more stricter in terms of tampering and allowing, some of these companies offering so much money, kind of divvying it up a little bit more and making sure that NIL is a better structured thing? Or do they say, okay, this is pro. We're gonna make this professional, and players can make as much money as they want, and it's kind of free reigns. So what is your outlook on that? Do you think college sports should be more amateur or professional in terms of the money aspect?
Yeah, I think free reigns is certainly the better way to go, but I'm not sure that's necessarily in line with professional. I think trying to have any sort of cap on how much money a team can spend is a terrible idea. I think it will never work. I think it really just kind of is going to be. Listen, there's always been money in college sports for prior to NIL's existence. Money has always existed. Um, there have been athletes who have been paid, and and we know about some of them, and we probably know about 1% of the guys that have been paid. Um, I think that you kind of just have to allow it to exist as however much schools want to pay, however much companies want to pay. You kind of just have to let them, because if you don't, it's going to happen behind the scenes, and it's going to be way worse. Um, I think that, and that is certainly a disadvantage to some of the smaller programs. But I think that in line with the transfer portal rules is going to make for a lot of upward mobility for a lot of guys, and you just kind of have to do a lot more recruiting in order to stay afloat. So I think that the best way to go about it is to just allow people to spend as much money as they want to spend, because they're going to kind of do it anyway.
That's fair. I agree that the cap situation isn't gonna work because of other involvement, that they're still gonna find ways to go around it. We talk tampering. It seems like tampering is kind of a huge issue going on. Obviously, there's guys out there that, there's definitely tampering going on in college football. There's no question about it. Is there a way to stop it? And if so, what would you recommend to try to limit or stop tampering just in college sports in general?
Yeah, I don't really know necessarily how you prevent it. I kind of it kind of falls in line, to be honest with you, with the way that you think of like interest groups, like the way that like they have a lot like in like I'm literally talking like the United States government right now. The way that like a lot of those companies can spend their money is like there's so many rules on it, and they can give a certain amount of money to this side, a certain amount of money to that side, and like the way that like those rules are laid out in terms of like who they can communicate with is very, very strict. The problem is that you can't tell a kid who is, a good quarterback and maybe is the backup and isn't going to play, that he can't go look at other schools, because he's allowed to do that. He's allowed to discuss transferring, but the problem is when the money gets involved. So I don't really know a good way to regulate such a thing. I guess it would kind of come down to the fact that you probably disallow coaches from talking to guys until they officially enter the transfer portal. Is probably the only way that you have any chance of that surviving. But you're never going to be able to track those conversations. They become almost impossible to regulate. But that would probably be the rule put in place. And should it be found out, it could be acted on. But you're ultimately never going to find out all those conversations.
Yeah, I think tampering is a very serious issue, but I don't think there's really a way to kind of not allow tampering just based on the fact of, you talk just a normal athlete, and let's say, I'm at Marist, my family graduated, some of my family members graduate at URI, and let's say a person, let's just say at Texas, and let's say one of my best friends is at Texas, and not that my parents are recruiting him or whatever, but there's certain regulations where they can't have food with my parents and my parents pay for them because that's infraction of, kind of the rules. I think that's kind of screwed up, but I think it comes down to the fact of, you look at the Deion Sanders situation at Colorado, and you look at his son, and they're talking about him tampering with his son. But guess what? His son is his son. Obviously, he's gonna know, to go to Colorado. That's kind of a, kind of like a lose-lose situation there in terms of tampering. But I want one last thought on NIL. You talk about companies and schools paying athletes. Do you think you have an issue with schools paying athletes and you think it should be companies paying athletes? Or is it like, okay, it's not necessarily that it's free, reigns, but that schools should be paying athletes, because that absolutely changes the dynamic of everything, just based on the fact of you have your Alabamas, your Texases, your Nebraskas, your Notre Dames. If schools are actually paying athletes, then we're talking a completely different topic of, if that's the case, should those top level schools be in a different league like they've mentioned in the past, especially with college football?
I certainly don't think schools should be paying athletes. I think that that's a really, really slippery slope that would be really detrimental for college sports. Um, I think that the endorsements should be allowed. I think that schools should be allowed to set up athletes to get those deals.
Okay.
Like schools should be able to facilitate those deals. And if I'm Kentucky and I'm trying to recruit a guy in college basketball, I say, hey, listen, we have a deal with Nike. Nike would love to work with you, but we can't directly pay you. I think that's the best way to do it. You can't have schools take money out of their pockets, give them to athletes.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. And before we move on, I think one thing at least that I've seen is, Marcus Freeman, the head coach of Notre Dame football. The way he recruited is he said, okay, when you guys come to Notre Dame, not that they have an NIL trust fund, but for all intents and purposes and better wording, they have an NIL trust fund. You got Brady Quinn involved. You got other companies involved with Notre Dame where we can't pay you directly, but we can help you go to the right spot. And I think that's kind of the best situation for all college athletes. One question before fully moving into NIL, and this is kind of a question based on just college sports / professional. Do you believe in firing a coach after one season?
If he's not a good coach, yeah.
After one season?
If there's a serious internal problem, then sometimes yes. And I think that firings a lot of time in sports are based on expectation. And when expectations are sky high and they sink real, real low, I think that at a certain point someone needs to be blamed, and typically a coach is the easiest person to blame.
Would you say that your quote unquote years for a coach is different based on professional to college? Here's what I'll say. My personal opinion is I understand firing a head coach in professional sports after a year. In college sports, I think that's absolutely absurd. I think that's stupid, unless if there's actually allegations against this coach, then you can fire him. But in college sports, if you're talking about having a guy there for 1 year, he's not able to actually have his own foundation. In professional, you kind of already have that foundation there. You kind of have everything laid out. You don't have to recruit players. It's kind of on your GM and kind of you to more focus on coaching instead of all the other aspects. Would you agree, disagree? What are your thoughts there?
No, I mean I think um every situation is different. Is there a certain coach you have in mind right now that you're trying to defend?
No, it's just you see college athletes getting fired after 1 year. And I just don't it doesn't happen that often. It's just I don't believe in firing a head coach after 1 year in college sports. I understand the transfer portal, but you're talking about guys after one season. How are they able to be there? One name is I think it was Willie Taggart at Florida State. Was a name a couple of years ago. They fired him after 1 year. I just don't agree with firing a coach after 1 year in college sports, because there's so many things involved that they have to actually have a foundation for them to succeed.
Yeah, I think I don't remember if Taggart was there for. I don't know if he was there for 1 or 2 years, but I think that a lot of instances where that occurs, it it's because there's so much more going on that we probably don't see. And when a locker room is lost or a situation kind of just reaches a point that it is almost it's like you pass the point of no return. And when you pass the point of no return, it's just like someone has to be blamed. This obviously is something that is unfortunate because yes, it takes a long time to build a base and to make a name for yourself. But when you look at a situation, I think Taggart was there for two. There was one coach, it might have been Charlotte's football coach who was fired. I don't know if
Taggart,
he,
I just looked it up, was there for 2 years.
yeah,
I can't remember the guy's name, but it was a college coach at it was one of the Texas, Nebraska, Florida State, like a big school, and he got fired. And the name is blanking on me, but I just didn't understand the fire. And it seemed like they had I think it was like a 7 or 8 win season. And it just didn't make sense to me because after one season, I understand you have expectations, but it's not like you had like a horrific season that we've seen in years past where coaches have been fired because they've had, such high expectations and flumped.
yeah. I in just instances like that, I think it's when you bring in someone and you get the chance to talk to them and you hire them, and as time progresses, you just realize that there's you made a crucial mistake. I think it's no different in the pros, honestly. I mean, we've had 2 years in a row now in the NFL where we've lost a coach before they could even finish their first year. Where it's just like we messed up, we hired the wrong guy, and we have to just kind of admit our mistakes because otherwise we're going to lose the entire team. We're going to lose players. We're going to lose, and it's so much easier now in college football where if we bring in a coach in 1 year and he messes things up, there's no incentive for guys to stay anymore. They can go play somewhere else next year. They don't have to wait a year to play football. So we could say, hey, no one wants to play for this damn coach and he sucks. Either we get him out and we keep our players, or we keep him and we're going to lose half our team.
I think that's fair. I think it just to me it depends on the situation.
Absolutely,
Um
it absolutely does.
and I think I just have a trouble time firing a head coach after one season unless if there's allegations or like you said players absolutely will not play for this coach. I just think, firing a guy after one season, what is that guy, especially in college sports? I understand the transfer portal and recruiting and all that, but how can a coach in one season turn the program around?
No, I agree.
I don't think that's possible. I also think when you look at NFL, I understand some of the firings, but the firings of the Houston Texans, the firing of Cully, just to me was stupid. He didn't really have a chance. I just think I think this is what's happening. I think certain players, not players, coaches, general managers are jumping the gun to fix the problem and they don't realize what the actual problem is. So much blame goes on the coaches, and it's not necessarily the coaches, it's the culture. And you can say all you want about the coaches, being part of the culture, but in one season, how is a coach completely changing the culture? I think that's an issue there. And I also think it's also the players. Not everything should be blamed on the coach.
No, I agree, and you're right. Absolutely, every situation is different, and you have to you have to be able to realize that there are a million other factors that as fans we just don't see. We're not in that locker room. We're not in that front office. We don't know whose jobs are at stake. We don't know what's at stake. I think, I mean, like I think back to last year, Urban Meyer being fired. I think from an outsider's perspective, we all said that was a very easy fire.
Yeah,
I think that you look at Nathaniel Hackett this year in Denver. That was a really easy fire. Go
I
back.
would. It's so.
You
If
don't
you
think that was an easy fire?
I wouldn't say easy, but I completely understand the fire. I wouldn't say it's an easy fire for one reason above all. There was no allegations against him. There was nothing quote unquote wrong with him in terms of allegations or um like misconduct, I guess you would say. Yes, he had
Yeah,
bad,
you're right.
and
But he,
that's what I would qualify as an easy hire, misconduct or stuff like that. Poor performance, I don't think is an easy fire. I think it's something you have to do, but I wouldn't consider that to be an easy fire, if that makes any sense.
I think it's an easy fire when you're supposed to be a Super Bowl contender and you're competing to be the worst team in football. I think it's an easy fire. I think if they had missed the playoffs, they had been an 8 or 9 win team. It's not an easy fire. But when you're literally the worst team in football, it's a pretty easy fire. But I think back a few years ago, when you look at it, it was Steve Wilks and Josh Rosen. They came in together. Steve Wilks was a first-year head coach. Josh Rosen was a rookie quarterback, and they were kicked. They were sent out the door in 1 year
That
for
was stupid.
Kingsbury and Kyler Murray. I think that was stupid, and I think you look at Steve Wilks right now in Carolina, and he's redeeming himself. I think that was a situation where you had a GM's ass on the line, and not necessarily a coach and a quarterback. I think that every situation is different, but you have to be able to realize what's going on inside of a locker room. And it's hard as a fan to think about that, but you have to think about what was going on at Denver this year. If Hackett was back next year, I think the defense might have revolted. I think they literally might have revolted. I think like Justin Simmons would have been asked to play quarterback next year. Like it would have gotten so bad to the point where they no one would want to play for that team anymore. And in that situation, you have to cut the head off the snake.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it from a locker room perspective, it makes complete sense. The only thing I'd say is when I define, like I've mentioned, when I defined easy hire, I don't look at performance. I look at the allegations and the outside, not the outside noise, but allegations, misconduct, stuff like that. Also, when you talk about 1-year coaches, guys that come to name, not necessarily 1-year coaches, but players that I feel like could have been good in the pros if given a real shot. Deshaun Kaiser, I feel like could have been a great pro if he got a real shot and wasn't with Hugh Jackson. Josh Rosen, I'm not saying he's going to be elite quarterback, but I think he could have been a half decent quarterback. Sam Darnold, he's like so. I mean, there's so many quarterbacks out there that I don't feel like get a real shot. And I think when you're talking about actual quarterbacks, rookie quarterbacks, young quarterbacks, it's about the system at place. And I don't know if it's me or if it's you or whatever it is. I think you're looking at the NFL and it seems like to get a head coach, it sounds like you have to get an offensive mind to be the head coach. And I don't think that's right, number one, but I think you need to have a good offensive coordinator. Another guy coaching wise that I don't feel like really got a shot is Joe Brady at Carolina. I think when you have no quarterback and you had Matt Rule as your head coach, he's a college football coach, just like Urban Meyer and Nick Saban and all these other guys are college football coaches. They don't deserve to be in the pros. And I think that's what happens
No,
there.
I agree. I think Joe Brady didn't get a fair shake. I think that Matt Rule was way in over his head, and I think that was found out pretty quickly. And Brady was the OC. Where's he at? I think he's in Buffalo now. I think he's the quarterback coach in Buffalo, so he's still stuck around. Um, but no, you talk about quarterbacks, and yeah, there are a lot of guys like Kaiser and Rosen who don't stick. But I count on you. Look at Geno Smith. All those quarterbacks have an opportunity to be backups. They all have an opportunity to be backups in this league. And if they are quality backups, they will stick on a roster. They will stick on a roster as quality backups. Jameis Winston sat out of football for a year. He was a backup in New Orleans. Baker Mayfield is going to be a backup next year. He's probably not going to start somewhere. He's probably going to be a backup in LA. There are instances where if you are a quality enough quarterback, you will stick as a backup. And those guys, they didn't even stick as backups, which says to me that they just weren't good pros.
See, the one thing I'd say with Geno Smith though is he was behind always an elite like he was behind usually an elite quarterback. Therefore, it was more solidified. He was a backup in the Josh Rosen, Deshaun Kaiser realm. I don't think they really had that starter except for Deshaun Kaiser when he had Aaron Rodgers, but even then he didn't really get a real shot to be the backup. But when you look at Geno Smith, he was solidified as a backup quarterback. You can't say that about Josh Rosen, Deshaun Kaiser, and other quarterbacks. I think Baker Mayfield will be fine if he's under the Rams offense and he's solidified as that backup, not just jumping up and around and saying, okay, you have a chance.
Yeah, well, I think also to your point, I mean, Josh Rosen had a chance. I think it was in Atlanta where he was competing to be a backup. I don't know if he won the job. I think that when you look at a guy who's an established backup, like you look at Jameis or Baker, it's because there is talent there. It's because there is skills there. When you look at Kaiser or Rosen, those guys don't stick as backups and they don't become established backups because they're just simply not good enough. I think if they were good enough, teams would find them and they would keep them. I don't think that they didn't have a fair opportunity to back up or they were competing for a job. Like it's just not the case.
Here's what I'll defend Kaiser and Rosen. I think in terms of backup, when you're looking for a backup quarterback, what are you looking for? You're looking for a guy who can stabilize the offense and be good enough, I would say. Is that fair that you would say that you're looking for as a backup?
Yeah, you want someone who could come into the game and that they can't lose you a football game. They maybe aren't someone who's going to go ahead and win you a football game, but they're not someone who's going to lose you a football game. And Josh Rosen has repeatedly, time and time again, come into games and prove that he loses football games. Same with Deshaun Kaiser. They're just not winners.
See, and you might say that they're not winners. And here's what I'll say is the reason that they weren't solidified backups. They were raw. They were developmental, prospects. You look at, for instance, Patrick Mahomes. He sat out his first year. That helped. If Patrick Mahomes did not sit out his first year, hot take here, I don't think he'd be as good as he is, and I think he'd be a average to above average quarterback. But I think sitting that year helped his development under Alex Smith. Also, you look at other guys' names that have sat out and learned from an elite quarterback and develop, like Trey Lance, for an example. I think he can be better in the future because he didn't play for that first year. I think that is what I'm talking about in terms of Rosen and Kaiser, that they're developmental prospects. You need to develop the quarterbacks and then get there. When you're looking for a quarterback right away, it's not going to work with those two guys. But if the offense and offensive staff develop these quarterbacks, I think they'd be good quarterbacks. And I'll take a hot take right now. I think Deshaun Kaiser, if he was developed, I think he's a better quarterback than I'd say he's probably right now, probably 15, 14, 12 in that range. And I think he's a better quarterback than Daniel Jones.
You're saying Deshaun Kaiser would be a top 15 quarterback in football right now?
If he was developed properly and
but so you talk about guys sitting out for a year.
Okay.
So those guys they didn't have to play. They were sitting in the same meetings, the same locker rooms, the same amount of they were in the same practices, the same training camp, the same OTAs every single year. Maybe they did not get the necessarily the on-field experience, but you have to be able to sit in those meetings the same way that Mahomes did for an entire year. And when his number was called, he came out and was great. Josh Rosen, 2 years. He was in Arizona's rookie year. He was in Miami his second year. He came into Atlanta his third year, sitting behind Matt Ryan, a veteran quarterback, an MVP who's been to a Super Bowl, and he was terrible. It's just like when you come into the game and you're not good, you're not good. You're just not good.
Deshaun, here's what I'll say. I think Josh Rosen, you have a better argument for, against saying that he's not a good quarterback. Deshaun Kaiser, if he was developed properly, he would have been fine. If you're telling me that you have Patrick Mahomes or Drew Brees or Peyton Manning, any of these elite quarterbacks, even Tom Brady to a certain extent, and have Hugh Jackson as your coach and that offensive staff, you're going to fail. You saw it with Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield was amazing with that offense. Guess how many wins he got? 5, 6, 7, 8. I get it. That's more significant than Deshaun Kaiser, but he had a lot more pieces
but if
around
you're gonna
him.
fail, you can't fail historically. You can't go 0-15 and throw over 20 interceptions and fail historically.
Can
And
you
then when
name
you get
one player on that entire team besides Joe Thomas that is still in the league?
I don't know what receivers were on that team. Maybe Rashard Higgins was he on that Cleveland team?
No.
I have no
they're all
idea.
practice squad guys. They're all practice squad guys now or out of the league. That is like when you have that on your team, like if you're Deshaun Kaiser, how are you expecting to succeed when your entire roster is practice squad or out of the league right now players?
But you can't fail historically. And then he was given a second chance in Green Bay, and he came in and he wasn't good.
Uh, did he really have a second chance in Green Bay?
He was a backup in Green Bay. I'm sure he played at one point. Here's his official passing
Okay.
numbers in Green Bay. He do 42 passes, 0 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions.
Okay, 2 interceptions. That's not bad.
But you can't. But why did he not stick as the backup there? Why was he not brought back the following year as the backup?
They had Aaron Rodgers as your starter, so obviously he's not going to start. They had Matt Flynn as their backup that year, and like we talk
In
about,
2018,
Matt Flynn, I believe, was the backup.
in 2018, Matt Flynn was the backup.
I'm 85% sure.
I mean, Kaiser came in and played when Rodgers didn't, so I assume Kaiser was the backup.
Well, so Kaiser was the third string, and then he was the second string because Matt Flynn kind of I think Matt, if I remember correctly, Matt Flynn kind of either retired after in the middle of the season, or the Seattle Seahawks or another team tried to pick him up. But Kaiser was the third string for the Green Bay Packers for an extended period of time. But I think when you're talking about Kaiser, it irritates me because I believe Deshaun Kaiser could be an NFL quarterback and could be a top 15 quarterback. The problem was he wasn't developed properly, and you can talk all you want about talent. He was a raw talent. When you're talking about pure raw talent, he's not gonna be successful right away if he's not developed. He was never developed.
But he had the chance to be behind a a, a Hall of Fame quarterback.
He played game one. In that season, Aaron Rodgers got hurt game one
But
against
there,
the Chicago Bears.
so why? Tell me why. They have him in house. They see him every day in practice. They see him all off season. They know the kind of guy that he is.
Yep.
They have him on their roster.
Yep.
Why did they feel the need to go draft another quarterback in the first round? If they felt that Deshaun Kaiser could be something.
Well, so when they drafted Jordan Love, it was a year or two after Kaiser. Like Kaiser left the Green Bay Packers. Then a year
Why
went
did he
by.
leave?
Then
Why did he
well,
leave?
no. Well, first Kaiser was there. Then he was not there for a year, and then they drafted Jordan Love. So they never drafted Jordan Love instead of keeping Kaiser. They got rid of Kaiser because they wanted a more solidified backup, which you mentioned, Geno Smith, because Deshaun Kaiser was a raw talent and they didn't develop him. That's why he didn't turn out to be a good quarterback. Nobody took the
So
time to
why?
develop him.
But there must have. You have to understand there must have been something in that year that they had him that said he's not good enough to be our backup.
Or you could just talk about the staff and then they didn't develop him. That staff had Mike McCarthy. If I remember correctly, that staff had Mike McCarthy as the head coach, and that offensive staff you talk about with the Aaron Rodgers, they all got fired because they wanted LaFleur as the head coach.
So where did Kaiser go after Green Bay?
Practice squad, and then went into free agency,
He was.
and
I
is now
he was a
now in
Raider.
real estate.
He was a Raider for 2 years.
Okay.
He was a Raider for 2 years. So they have him in house for 2 years.
And do the Raiders have their offensive staff? You're
But
talking about all three situations where their offensive staff have all left.
but why? But why does then not every single player get purged off the roster? Why does Derek Carr remain? Why has Derek Carr been the quarterback through multiple coaching staffs?
Because he's a stabilizer.
But they look at him and they say that's a guy that we can rely on. That's someone that is good. They don't look at Deshaun Kaiser and say that he will be anything.
I would disagree. He's not good now. I think certain coaching staffs. Now, I'm not saying it's the Raiders, Packers, or Browns. Certain coaching staffs want a guy who's going to win now. They don't want a developmental guy.
But you have to understand. Like, look at Think about how I would love to see the number of coaches that Geno Smith played for. I would love to see it in the three different teams that he was on.
Okay, that's a good argument. The only thing I would say is the two playing styles are completely different.
But Geno was a project.
I would disagree.
Like there was times where people like looked at Geno and said, "You're not going to be anything." But he every single time a new coaching staff came in, Geno stuck as a backup. He stuck in the locker room.
I disagree. I think Geno Smith has always been a backup, and I don't think it's not that he was a project. He was just a solidified backup. There's a difference between a solidified backup and raw talent. DeShone Kizer was a raw talent. Geno Smith was a solidified backup. The solidified backup in the NFL is closer to being a starting quarterback than a raw talent. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, probably.
Exactly. And that is what I think what happened with DeShone Kizer. There wasn't an offensive staff that wanted to develop him. I'm not saying he's going to be, the next Patrick Mahomes. I said he was going to be an average, above average quarterback if he was developed. He was not developed.
Like I understand the argument that you're making. I do. But at a certain point, if your ceiling is as high as being a top 15 quarterback in football, your floor can't be one of the worst quarterbacks in football.
That's what his floor was.
But it can't be. It can't be. It just can't be.
What do you mean it can't be?
I'm telling you that if you want to stick in this league, it just can't be. You can't be someone who's not a top 100 quarterback in football. That can't be your floor.
Okay, so let's just go back more quarterbacks. There have been multiple I'm not saying that I'll agree with this. There's no quarterback in the NFL right now that's floor was as bad as DeShone Kizer, but his ceiling was as high as that. However, there have been quarterbacks that their floor has been garbage and their ceiling has been elite, and they've been, mediocre.
Such as? Who's a quarterback who falls into that criteria? I think Sam Darnold's a guy who you look at that was who ended up becoming really mediocre when he was talked about.
His ceiling, his floor was higher.
His floor was certainly higher. All of these guys' floor was higher. There's no one whose floor was as low as DeShone Kizer, I promise you.
Mitchell Trubisky is similar, but is not as low. It's similar. Now, you might think that's a hot take. It's similar, not as high, but you also have to understand Trubisky. The difference between why Trubisky and DeShone Kizer, why Trubisky has sticking around a little bit more, is because Trubisky has more mobility, I would say.
And Trubisky, in his rookie year, didn't start initially, and he was also, you have to understand, he was drafted to be the guy. Kizer was never drafted to be the guy. Never.
Well, another point is DeShone Kizer should have stayed in school. That's his own fault. But I'm
saying Kizer was a second round pick.
High second, yep.
But he was never drafted to be the guy. The investment was never put in him. And you also have to take into account when you look at Josh Rosen. Josh Rosen was out in 1 year because he did not win enough games to prevent his team from having the number one pick in the draft. DeShone Kizer was 0-15 his rookie year. You have to win. You can't be historically bad, because the second you're historically bad, you give the team an excuse to draft somebody else. Trubisky, I think the Bears, they won like 5 or 6 games his rookie, maybe like 4 or 5 games his rookie year. And when you're not historically bad, you give your chance a chance to go into year 2. And Trubisky, they won like 11 games his second year, and they were a playoff team.
Okay, so I think you have a point on that he wasn't the guy right away, and when you're historically bad, you have to move on. The only thing that you can say is after DeShone Kizer, after his first year of catastrophe with the Cleveland Browns, and they draft Baker Mayfield, how many wins did that team have?
I don't. You said like 5?
No, that was down the road. That was down the road. When Baker Mayfield was a rookie quarterback with the Cleveland Browns, how good were they?
I don't have the number at the top of my head. I could find it here in a second.
Cleveland Browns
Let's see. His rookie year was what, 2018?
around there.
They were 7-8-1 his rookie year.
I don't think. What was the year before that?
0-16 to 7-8-1. Yeah, you can't be historically bad. 7 wins for a rookie quarterback is awesome. I'd be ecstatic if my rookie quarterback won 7 games.
Uh, Joe Thomas was also injured. I know you might think I'm crazy, like actually saying this. Joe Thomas was injured Deshaun Kaiser's rookie year, and I'm not saying. All I'm saying is once Baker Mayfield got to the Cleveland Browns, they had more pieces around him than what they had with Deshaun Kaiser.
But
I
who
think
do you want? Who do you want to blame for the 0-16 season? Put someone to blame.
the GM.
It was the same GM and the same coach for Baker. Hugh Jackson was there Baker's rookie year, and they won 7 games.
So if you want well, I mean, but there's a difference. There's a difference. If you want to really dive into it, you can say that Deshaun Kaiser is a terrible quarterback. I think he just wasn't developed properly, and I think yes, you can blame Deshaun Kaiser for that one bad season, but I think there's a lot more factors. Same thing with the Denver Broncos this year. You can blame Russell Wilson all you want. Personally, I think some of the blame has to go on Russell Wilson. But would you say that all of the blame is on Russell Wilson? The correct answer is no. And it was pieces around him. Jerry Jeudy was hurt. Sutton was hurt this year. Their offensive line has been abysmal at best. Their defense is solid. I'll give you that. But there's so many pieces that are not working for the Denver Broncos, and it's not all on Russell Wilson.
Can I pose you a question?
Go ahead.
And I want you to think about this, and I think it will shed some clarity on you on how you have to look at Deshaun Kaiser. Russell Wilson is the second highest paid quarterback in football, right?
Yep.
He's in an 8-year deal in Denver.
Yep.
They gave up their first round pick for him.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think right now that if Russell Wilson was a free agent, they could get rid of him this year, and they still had their pick, they had the number 3 pick in the draft, they would draft a quarterback?
After this season, that the Denver Broncos would draft a quarterback over re-signing Russell Wilson?
Yeah.
I think so.
So how can you blame the Browns?
Oh, I'm not blaming the Browns. I'm just saying what is wrong. Like what is wrong with
that's
Deshaun
exactly
Kaiser?
what it is it's based on performance.
Yeah.
And when you don't have something invested in a guy, they took Kaiser with a second round pick. They didn't invest a top 5 pick on this guy. It's really easy to just go, let's take our new guy.
Yeah, I think all your points are fair. I just think Deshaun Kaiser wasn't developed properly, and I think if developed properly, you can talk all you want. If a player is developed properly, yes, they're going to be good if they're actually developed properly. But I think his ceiling is a lot higher than people give it credit for.
And that may be the case, but that's a potential and a ceiling that will just never be realized when you have a guy who's just ultimately not that talented.
I would disagree on talent. I think it was decision making was his problem.
Whatever it is, it goes into that. That's a part of it. Those are like the same people that say Aaron Rodgers is better than Tom Brady and Justin Herbert's better than Joe Burrow because he's got more talent and he can throw the ball at cool arm angles. Give me a quarterback who can put it in there and stay poised and make good decisions and win games.
So you're saying that Tom Brady, from a raw talent standpoint, well, actually, you don't want to use.
I just don't subscribe to the raw talent idea.
So okay, so let's go. When you talk about raw talent, would you say? Because this is a comparable, I would say. Who would you take, Derek Carr or Dak Prescott?
Dak Prescott.
Because he's got better raw talent.
No, I just think that Derek Carr's not a good decision maker. I think Dak. I trust Dak more with the football, to be honest with you.
Okay, Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott.
That's a tough one. That's really Kirk is just very inconsistent. I think that these are. I kind of put them in the same tier. Very interchangeable. Okay. I'd say this year maybe I'll take Dak. I think he's looked better.
Raw talent.
No, I think this is a bad example. I think it's the bad example of raw. I think that you're. I tell you what, I'll take Joe Burrow over Justin Herbert 10 out of 10 times.
Well, I would too, but I don't
But
think
Justin Herbert is raw talent, and he can throw the ball.
I don't think I think his raw talent is overmatched. You talk about raw talent. This guy's mind is he studied at Oregon. He studied general science. General science.
No, I know.
General science. I mean, come on.
No, I agree with you. I'm just saying, I don't think that I'll take. There's a long list of guys that played alongside Aaron Rodgers. Like, give me Peyton Manning, give me Tom Brady, give me Drew Brees. I'll take them all over Aaron Rodgers.
Drew Brees is more of an argument for me, but I agree on the other two.
Like, I don't subscribe to the arm talent. Look what he could do. Give me a guy who's gonna win you a football game.
So who'd you? So okay, I got a question for you. Who's better, Patrick Mahomes or Tom? Well, you're gonna say Tom. You would say Tom Brady's better than
Right.
Patrick
I
Mahomes.
mean, it's really hard to say anyone over Tom Brady, but I think that Mahomes is the only guy in the NFL who has a chance to ever catch Brady.
So obviously, I'm just trying to think of a good comparable when you're talking about a good player, like same tier wise, but talent is different.
I would argue if you want a
Russ,
good example of one, yeah,
Russell
go ahead.
Wilson, Derek Carr.
Well, this year I would have to take
Not
Derek
including
Carr.
this year. Not including
Not
this year.
including this year, I
Not
would take
including the
Russ. I would take Russ.
better raw talent.
I don't think that you're. You want to hear a good example? I would probably take Joe Burrow over Josh Allen.
Joe Burrow over Josh Allen. That's crazy.
So I don't think it's
That's
crazy.
crazy.
I
That's
don't think it's
crazy.
crazy.
That's crazy.
I think that Josh Allen, his raw talent gets really overstated, and his decision making and his occasional just like mental lapses are just something that I don't want in a quarterback.
But Patrick Mahomes had those.
Does he?
He did. I'm not saying he doesn't anymore. He did.
When?
He had 4 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, pretty much the majority of his games in his first season as a starter.
He came out and threw like 4 touchdowns his like first week of the season.
Yes, but he also had 2 interceptions.
But Mahomes' interceptions are a lot of times Mahomes' interceptions are he thinks he can put a ball in a certain spot.
Okay, fine. That's fair. That's fair. That's fair.
There's I'll hear no argument for Mahomes not being that. If there's anyone who thinks that Mahomes is not the best quarterback in football, they seriously need help.
Okay, I would completely agree. Since you think Joe Burrow is better than Josh Allen, do your top 5 best quarterbacks right now.
Top 5 best quarterbacks.
Because you got
right
Mahomes.
now.
You got Mahomes.
I'll take Mahomes is one.
Yep.
And the gap between Mahomes and everybody else is wider than the gap between like quarterback number 2 and quarterback number like 6. I'm gonna be honest with you. The gap between I put Joe Burrow too.
That's absurd.
The gap between absurd. Burrow to Mahomes, Burrow's closer to being probably 6 than he is to being 1, and I put him 2.
Okay, so you got Mahomes, you got Burrow. Stupid. Next,
I'll put Josh 3.
So Josh Allen.
I think that.
Yep.
I think that you'd still be stupid to not put Josh in that tier, and I think that those 3 are honestly kind of in a tier of their own these days.
Okay.
I think that there's no one who's really
who'd you say
that same playing field.
So who'd you say is close? Like the next kind of not necessarily tier, but who's close to being better than Allen/Burrow? If you were to say close,
I think that next tier of guys, Herbert's in that next tier. Lamar, I still put in that next tier.
Oh my god, oh my god.
Because I still put Hurts in that next tier because of what they can do as runners. I think Rodgers is still in that next tier.
Okay. I was gonna say if you don't put Rodgers, that's.
I think those guys are in that next tier. I don't know exactly. I mean, it's tough because I haven't seen Lamar this year. I think Jalen Hurts is overrated because of his offensive line. I think that Rodgers certainly doesn't have a lot of talent out there with him, but he certainly hasn't looked like himself either.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think that that's probably that next group. After that, you start throwing around your Dax, your Kirk Cousins.
Okay, your Derek
I put
Carrs.
I think Jared Goff belongs in that third tier as well. I think Jared Goff doesn't get enough love. Um, to be honest with you, I think Goff is still a solid quarterback in football, and the numbers back that up.
I would say Goff is the definition of a stabilizing quarterback, stopgap quarterback. Do you know what I mean by stopgap quarterback?
That's really not that's like a kind of a lazy take, to be honest with you.
Well, so that what I consider a franchise quarterback is different than what most people would say. Franchise quarterback, in my opinion, means that you have the ability to be a top 10 quarterback.
I think Goff is probably in the 10 to 15 range right now.
I would agree, but I don't think he's going to get better, if that makes sense.
Probably not at this point in his career, but go look at his numbers this year. I think they'll surprise you if you look at Jared Goff's numbers this
That
year.
no, that no, I know they are because I haven't looked at them, but I've seen them in the past, and they look a lot better number wise than what you see on the field. However, I think hot take here. People don't like this take, but I'm going to say it anyways. I don't think Derek Carr is a franchise quarterback.
No, I
I
agree
think
with
he's
you. I
a
agree with you.
great quarterback. I don't think he's a franchise. Same thing with Dak Prescott. Same thing with Kirk Cousins.
No, absolutely, absolutely. But you also have to realize that they are. It, I totally get what you're saying, but I think that you have to understand that not every team
Needs a
can
franchise
have a top
quarterback.
five quarterback in
No,
football.
I agree. I agree with that, but I'm just saying if you are a team like any of those teams, and let's say you have a bad year and you're picking in the top five and you have a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud, and let's say you have pieces around them where you don't necessarily need to draft a defensive lineman or whatnot, you draft a quarterback, and I think that fits perfectly
No,
because I
I
like
agree,
the rookie
100%.
quarterback.
I very
Um,
much agree with you. Yeah,
I don't I see I guess the way that your outline of your top seven, top eight quarterbacks make a little bit more sense. I'm just a little surprised that you don't have a Dak Prescott or a Derek Carr or a Kirk Cousins better than Jackson or Hurts. That's the only surprise I have for you. I agree with the majority of this, but just from what I've been hearing that you don't like this raw talent, I think when you're talking about Jackson and Hurts, they have better raw talent than those guys. But I think those other guys are more stable quarterbacks.
yeah. It's the thing about. I think that there's a difference between raw talent as a passer and raw talent as a runner. I think that when you're talking about raw talent, you think that I'm talking about just like from a pure athletic perspective, but that's not the case. When I say raw talent, I mean like they glorify Aaron Rodgers and they
Oh yeah,
glorify Justin Herbert for their arm talent and their people who will say, well, Tom Brady's the GOAT, but Aaron Rodgers is the best that I've ever seen throw a football.
I
What the
disagree. I
hell does
think
that
Dan
mean?
Marino's better.
But like, you know what I mean? Like, what the hell does that mean?
Yeah,
What
I
and why is that important? Sure, in a vacuum, if you put 100 targets around us and you said, Aaron, throw these at cool arm angles and smack these targets, maybe he's better than Tom Brady at that. But put him on a football field 11 on 11, and there's a lot of guys that I'll take over him.
I think from a you might actually agree with this, but I think most people wouldn't. I think from a pure talent standpoint, I think Patrick Mahomes is better than Aaron Rodgers. And I think it's from a pure talent standpoint. When I talk about pure talent, it's different than most people. Most people would say, okay, it's the athletic standpoint. No, it's what my eyes see, what he
Yeah,
has the ability to
yeah,
do. It's mind, it's everything. It's not necessarily the mind in the raw talent. It's what he has the ability to do.
I agree with you. And at the same time, why I think Mahomes is so special
Oh,
is
he's
because
the
he
best
has better
quarterback.
raw talent than anybody, but he also has the ability to just win football games. His record when they're down by double digits, he's the only quarterback in NFL history who's an above 500 record when trailing by double digits.
Yeah,
Only quarterback in NFL history.
don't ask Matt Ryan about winning by a lot
Yeah.
of points. He's
Well, no, that's when he's leading. I'm talking about when Mahomes'
yeah,
team is
yeah,
losing,
yeah. So
which is
that's
why I think the gap between Mahomes and everybody else is so big because he's not only completely talented, but he just also has the poise and composure to win football games.
all right. We're gonna move on to talking Denver Broncos football. I know we mentioned this just a little bit about if let's say the trade didn't go through and Russell Wilson was a free agent at this year, you would say that the Denver Broncos probably would draft a quarterback. What are the holes do you think in the draft that you're talking about that the Denver Broncos need to fill? And then number two, I want you to start with number two first. Do you think that you should sit Russell Wilson the rest of the year and start Brett Rippon?
I'm indifferent on. No, I think that there's okay. You gave me a couple questions here, and I had an answer for the first one, and then the second one completely threw me. We'll start with holes that I want to fill. I think you go just in the trenches, offensive line and defensive line. I think are probably just the two places we can just always use more bodies, and I think that's probably the best place to go when guys start getting injured. A lot of people don't realize Denver actually dealt with a lot of injuries this year as well. Garrett Bowles went down pretty early, starting left tackle. They had a couple injuries on the defensive line, guys that just went out.
Williams.
Yeah, like just you want more bodies up there in the trenches, especially after you trade Bradley Chubb, maybe someone else on the edge. As for Russell Wilson sitting out the rest of the year, I think it's maybe the worst idea ever. I think it's maybe the absolute worst idea ever because there is a locker room of guys that is looking at Russell Wilson and saying that he is not the quarterback. He is not the future of this team. And if you sit him out and try to and be like, you know what, we're playing for next. He needs to be out there along with those guys playing these last 2 weeks of the season because they need something to build on for next year. They need some sort of something that they can hold on to and say, you know what, like, let's go out and kill these last 2 weeks. Hackett is gone. They've said that Hackett's the problem and Russ isn't. Russ, can you give us something in these 2 weeks to prove it?
I see your point. I disagree again. I think it's about mindset. I think Russell Wilson needs a break from everything. I think Hackett getting fired could put more pressure on Russell Wilson these last 2 weeks.
It absolutely
And
will.
and I think Russell Wilson really needs to relax, play free in these last 2 weeks. However, I understand talking locker room, and I know you're a big locker room guy, but I think it's about having him in his mental health because I don't think I'm not saying that he's not mentally strong, but I think his mindset is not there this year. I don't know what's going on with him, but I don't think it's there. I think that is the biggest concern if you're the Denver Broncos entering next season, the mindset of Russell Wilson. And that's why I think you sit him out for the rest of the season. I understand the locker room and what's going to happen there, but I think you talk about guys, and I'll bring this up to Tua Tagovailoa, I think needs to sit the rest of the season. I understand that's a different issue when you're talking about concussions, but I think it's mental health has been so important in sports. And I think that it's time for him just to take a breath, relax, and then kind of regain momentum for next season.
I do understand that. And I think that, again, you're playing Kansas City this week, which is an uphill battle. But I think that one of the few instances that Broncos fans and players alike really felt something at Russell Wilson was that first game against Kansas City, where like Russ attempted a mount to come back and we're a 4-win football team and he's diving for first downs and putting his body on the line. It was like that's the guy that we brought in was supposed to be our leader, and he needs to show something in these 2 weeks that says this season is lost, but I'm still your leader. I'm still the leader of this football team, and he doesn't have to go out and beat Kansas City. And I think they played the Chargers last week of the season. He doesn't have to go win those football games, but he needs to be there with those guys. He needs to be on the field and say like, you know what, like we're all in this together. And I think it's just as simple as that. He has to just play free, play as best as he can. He doesn't have to go out there and be, you know, unbelievable and be the old Russell Wilson, but play with your guys and ride out these last 2 weeks of the season.
Would you say for these last 2 weeks of last 2 weeks of the season that the Broncos should rely more on the run game so that Wilson can relax a little bit and not feel pressure to throw the ball as much as he did with Hackett? Or would you say, okay, Russell Wilson, it's your offense, do what you want to do, don't put too much pressure on yourself, just kind of relax and play free?
No, I think you kind of if you want to rely more on the run game, I think the play caller is still there.
Oh
I
my
don't think he was
gosh.
fired. I
Jeez.
I think he'll probably be fired after the season, but I think that he's
Should
still
be.
just there just to have someone to physically in the building for these last 2 weeks. So I think that he's still there. It'll probably be very similar to what you've seen, and I think that that's fine. I don't think that it has to be. You could rely more on the run game. That's fine, but I just think Russ should be out there. I think it's the best look for him if he's out there.
That's fair. I think Broncos. I think they might be the best looking 4-win team in the NFL. I know you don't want to hear that, but
No,
I think
I agree with you.
I
A
think
lot of close one score games that if your offense was 75% as good as it was supposed to be, you're probably a 9-win team.
if your offense was just average, you would be potentially to be in the playoffs. But
Yeah.
I think the Giants, and these are my Giants, I think they might be the worst like above 500 football team to ever see like the
You
plenty
might
of
be
growth.
right. You might be right, but they compete in games. They don't lose.
Um
Like, give me a team that competes. They compete in games because you look at the old Giants formula. You look at the 2007 Giants, the 2011 Giants. No, by no stretch of the means were those elite football teams. They were teams that competed. They were teams that had tough defenses. And if you could put Magic together for 4 games in January, you're Super Bowl champions.
all right, last question before we go. Russell Wilson. I
Yeah.
just got a question for you on Russell Wilson. How many more years do you give Russell Wilson to figure it out?
If he's bad next year, he won't be the quarterback the year after. But he will be given a full year next year. They're gonna have to probably win. They're gonna have to be at least competing for the playoffs up until late in the season for him to be given another year. But if they have another season like this, he's done.
Okay, let's say hypothetical that the Denver Broncos are 500 next year. You would give him another year,
Probably
correct?
because the contract just dictates that he has to. It would be year one with a new coach, and you say let's go into year two with this coach. Russ looks decent enough, and maybe we can make the playoffs next year. Yeah,
Okay. What if it continues that the Denver Broncos, you're in a tough division, continue to be 500? How many years is it going to be with Russell Wilson at quarterback?
it would really just depend on how much of the problem he is of keeping them 500. If he's a big part of the problem, he probably has a shorter leash. If he's playing well, and maybe the rest of the team isn't, it's probably a little bit of a longer leash.
That's fair. I think there's going to be some interesting quarterbacks coming out sooner rather than later. CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, interesting. We'll see what happens with those two guys. Personally, not a fan of either of them, but that's for another
Okay,
day. I
I'm
think
not a
the
fan of
best.
Stroud. I think Young's good, but yeah,
Yeah, well, Young is thin and kind of short. But that's for another day. I think when you're looking at quarterbacks, the quarterback that I want for the New York Giants, and you might think I'm stupid, he has not even entered college yet. Arch Manning, please come to the New York Giants. We need you, Arch. I just want Arch so bad. And Matt, do you have any last words for our listeners before we wrap it up?
no. Thank you for having me on here. I'm glad I got a chance to do this. I think it's important for us all in sports media as well as just our Marist community here. Help each other out, all of our personal endeavors. I love hopping on anybody's show, getting the chance to be a part of this for anyone, especially some of the younger guys like yourself. I think it's important. I hope you repay the favor when you're a senior for some sophomore who asks you to be on a show.